Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you guys by August Uncommon Tea. As you guys know, I'm a huge tea drinker, and personally, I prefer tea over coffee because of its nootropic benefits. August is a new tea brand based in downtown Los Angeles. They're reinventing tea by creating unexpected blends that excite modern drinkers. So check them out at www.august.la. Hey there, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. You guys, this week I'm excited to think that I might just be introducing you to a health and wellness practice that you've never even heard of. It's called floating. Well, more specifically, it's actually called sensory deprivation. You might have heard of it, you probably haven't, or just maybe, like me, you've experimented with it in the past and seen very interesting and encouraging results. Either way, in this episode, we're going to explain to you what the hell it is. And we're going to talk to one of the experts on sensory deprivation and learn not only about the powerful benefits for the body and the mind, but more importantly, how you can practically implement sensory deprivation, or floating as it's called, into your daily life. After all, I'm betting most of you guys don't have massive 800-pound saltwater chambers in your basements. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to cover magnesium supplementation. We're going to talk about anxiety. We're going to talk about depression. We're even going to talk about the possibility of aliens having landed on Earth. It's a fun episode, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it. So let me introduce you to serial entrepreneur, author, esteemed coach, and floating enthusiast who's making floating more accessible all over the world, Mr. Shane Stott. Mr. Shane Stott, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You know, I experimented with floating over a decade ago when I was doing my SATs. And I hadn't discovered meditation at the time, so I found this great way that supposedly improved your brain's performance. And I did it a few times and it really helped. And then I kind of completely forgot about it. So I'm excited to hear where the kind of hobby, if you would call it a hobby, where it's gone in the last decade.
Wow, 10 years ago, I bet it was really hard to find a float place. Because I started 6 years ago and it was impossible. There was one in Vegas, so that was the closest maybe.
Yeah, I think I was driving about 25 to 30 minutes into the Los Altos Hills. I mean, it's California, so you can always find this new age crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I researched actually here in Israel, and I wasn't able to find a convenient one to get to.
Oh, get out of here. Well, maybe you're more of a home floater type then.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. Shane, so I usually start these interviews, I have to admit, with a biographical background of individuals, certainly not a biological background. But you're a bit of a special case because I think if we just launch into talking about floating and how you're an expert in it, a lot of people might look at the superhuman theme of the podcast and think that you're literally out there flying or something. So why don't we start out with a little bit of an explanation of just what floating is for the uninitiated?
Yeah, let me give you the easy, quick explanation. So floating is essentially a therapy practice where you get in a tank or a chamber. So imagine something, say, the size of like a camping tent. That's about the size of it. But in this chamber, it can be hard, it can be soft, whatever it is. It holds water, and it holds about 10 inches of water that is your skin temperature. And in this water, there's 800 pounds of salt, literally 800 pounds. The water is almost like silky smooth. It's so full of salt. But you lay on your back in this water, in this chamber, and you can't feel the water after a while because it's skin temperature. In this chamber, it's also pitch black, so you can't see. Your ears are under the water surface, so you can't hear. So you can't feel, see, hear everything. And you're floating. They call it, one of the keywords is like sensory deprivation or isolation tank, but it removes all of your senses. So it's this crazy environment for your mind. And I've used it heavily for meditation and thinking. And people use it for anxiety, PTSD, stress, but it's this new crazy therapy that I think once people get over the kind of fear or the weirded out by it, they're finding that there's just huge benefits.
That's awesome. What are some of those benefits?
So let me tell you a little bit about how I got into floating. So 10 years ago, I was living in LA and I totally had a giant run-in with panic and anxiety, which then led to depression. And my life just collapsed. And I honestly didn't know how I was going to go on with my life. But through this collapse, I found my way into, well, first off, I got in and got therapy. And I actually got on medication that helped me get everything back to zero. But I found that meditation really helped anxiety. It was just huge. Like when I would meditate, my days were better. And when I'd meditate for a week, my weeks were better and months were better. And so I found my way from meditating for anxiety to looking for easier ways to meditate. I'm not sure if you've ever meditated much, but the distraction is usually the hardest part of meditation. So I was browsing and I stumbled upon, here's an easier way to meditate because it eliminates all distractions. So that's how I found my way into floating, was through anxiety, panic, depression. But people are using it for stress relief. People are using it for sleep improvement. A lot of athletes are using it. We just had an NFL athlete get one of our tanks, and he uses it for recovery after practice. In the book, I'll tell you about in a little bit, there's an ultra marathon runner in California, and he runs 100-mile races, and he used to recover in 2 weeks' time. He was totally broken down like an old man for 2 weeks, and now his recovery is about 1 week, so cut in half. So huge edge in athletics. So
wow, interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize all the different benefits.
Sure. Now, is that recovery speed because of the reduction of stress, or because I remember reading that just having your body in a natural position, it kind of gravitates to its natural position. There's no pressure anywhere, so you achieve optimal blood flow. I mean, is it all of that, or is it mostly the mental?
It's a few things. It's actually mental, physical. So the mental edge is, or the mental issue is, you get in and you zone out and you recover. You can also visualize your recovery or your next race, whatever. But another couple things that are huge is, so like you said, it's the water is like almost a zero gravity environment. So they say that it actually decompresses your spine up to 1.5 inches, because once you lay in that zero gravity environment for an hour and a half, 2 hours, everything decompresses. So it's really I don't know if the word's rejuvenative.
It's good for you.
It's great for your joints, decompression. And another thing is all the Epsom salt. People use the salts and Epsom salts to soak even now with like baths and that sort of thing. And this water holds 800 pounds of that Epsom salt. So that magnesium is really great for soaking the muscles and recovering the muscles as well. So
right,
it hits on a few different angles.
Well, it's a lot like the Dead Sea, except without all the Russian tourists and the baking hot sun, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And it saves me a 4-hour drive. So, okay, cool. So you got into it because of anxiety and you became an enthusiast. Walk me through that path, because I know you were an entrepreneur running a business before this whole thing, which might have something to do with the anxiety, if I'm not completely misplaced on that.
Absolutely. I think entrepreneurs naturally run themselves a little hard and tend to kind of hit the wall a little harder. But I found my way in the weirdest things. I was doing my original family business and we were doing manufacturing. But when I discovered this floating thing, I just knew that I had to have a float tank. It was really weird. I hadn't done it. And I was going to travel to go float in Vegas, which was like a quick plane ride away. And then I was like, well, if I like it, then I just got to save even that much more money to get a float tank here. But I ended up just building a tank in my basement out of like stuff you would get at Home Depot and a farm fertilizer tank. I bought a farm fertilizer tank I could saw in half and lay in.
Wow.
And then I plumbed it with aquarium parts. I framed it and insulated it like a home. And I documented the whole thing. I was pretty obsessed about it, to be honest. And then once I had this tank built in my basement, I put all the plans online. And it was the weirdest thing, because that's when I realized there was hundreds of people like me around the world who wanted to float, but there wasn't options. There wasn't things in their area. And they started buying my plans. I sold them for $20. They would buy my plans, build a tank. My tank that was in my basement even exists in some float centers around the U.S. Like, it just took off. And then That's how I ended up meeting my partner for Zen. And Zen is the company where we make the float tanks out of like a flexible canvas material. But it was organic how it all took off and started.
That's awesome. I love the kind of lean startup business where it really started from just passion. That's how all of my businesses, including this one, have started. So I always love these stories.
Isn't it beautiful?
It really is. It's like if you set out to start a business, you almost inevitably fail, at least in my experience. But if you set out to build something cool that you want for yourself, it inevitably ends up being something.
I totally agree. And I feel like when you start off small and organic and flesh out the idea before you're going big, then it's like planting a seed instead of taking a pre-grown tree and sticking it in your yard and hoping it works out. It's like starting from a seed point.
That's a great analogy. That's a really great analogy. I love it. So one thing I want to also ask, when I was originally getting into this, there was a lot of research about delta brain waves. And, we've had neuroscientists on the show who talk about the ratio of alpha and delta brain waves and how you want to manage that ratio in such a way. And floating was beginning to be explored as one of those ways to really, I believe it's increase your delta brainwaves. Has there been any research? Have you kept on with the research on that?
Well, I have not kept up on the research on that, but I'm going to take on another project about how people use floating for optimizing themselves, kind of like biohacking type stuff. And I'm going to dive into that because I believe in that, the brainwave stuff, because I know the state that you're in when you're floating is the state right above dreaming. Is it theta?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I compare it to sometimes when I'm sleeping and I'm in that state right before I crash, I have these big ideas because it's like my brain's filters turn off and I think a little abstract, but that's what it feels like in a tank is you're in the brain part that you're not usually in.
Oh, I like that. We should really connect you with Dr. Andrew Hill because he's all about measuring the brain. We did an episode on that and I'd be super, super interested to measure the brain, not just in the tank, but a couple of days on. I think that'd be amazing.
Oh, wow. Dude, I would love that. Seriously, if you could connect me, I would love to start getting some data on that.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool. We should do that. We should set that up as a project and then document it along the way on the blog. What does it look like day 1, day 2, day 3? That would be neat. We should do that.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. I have you on record saying we're going to do it. So we're going to do it.
We will.
All right. So let me ask this, Shane. Obviously, you've dealt with the anxiety. You sound like a pretty calm, pretty chilled out guy, even though you're running 2 businesses. What have been the other lasting effects in your daily life?
That's a good question. I remember when I first started floating, when I built the tank in my basement, I was floating every day in the morning before work. And I call it the state of float, but you get so comfortable in this way of being when you're in a float tank where everything is totally calm. There's no outside input. There's no barking dogs. There's no cars, noises, sounds, buzzes from your phone. But the state that you practice in a tank, I got really good at it and I could draw it out in my regular life. So I remember probably a month after I started floating, people at work were like, "You're way too calm. This is like really stressful. Why are you so calm?" And I am convinced that I've learned that state of float. I know what it's like to be that way, feel that way, and I can draw it out at any time. And it's almost like a permanent adjustment you make once you kind of learn what that state is for you. But that was one of the big things that stuck with me is just I had this permanent shift where I realized I could take on anything easier in a calm, relaxed state. Even stuff when the whole world is exploding and everything's going to hell, you can still draw on that state. And I feel like you perform better in that state. I feel like anyone would.
I love that. And I think that you can draw a lot of parallels between that and meditation as you did earlier. But it sounds as if you say that it's essentially the same thing as meditation, just it's much more approachable and much easier to get into. Would you say that's pretty applicable?
Yeah. So people say, "Oh, it's supercharged meditation." Well, meditation is meditation, but it's easier meditation. Because I feel like that's one of the challenges with meditation is distraction. So yes, it's easier meditation, but it's the same meditation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's also meditation for me. One of the most difficult things is body posturing, actually, I'm not at a point where I can sit for more than 30 minutes in an upright position. It hurts.
Me neither. I usually recline on the couch and I try and get everything right, but I try and not get too leaned back where I fall asleep. So that it's kind of tricky. But in a float tank, I don't fall asleep. I get really close, but it's great because everything's perfect. Like your posture's perfect. There's no hard spots, sore spots, warm spots. Everything is just gone. It's the perfect environment for it.
All right. So you have me salivating now. Now I really want to float. Explain to me about this whole home flotation tank. Like, how practical is this thing?
Yeah. So when I was building the tanks in my basement, that's when a guy named William reached out to me and he started asking me all these questions about how do I design it? Why is it like this? What color should this be? He asked me all these questions. And then next thing you know, he throws out his idea. This was his baby. And he's like, "Dude, what do you think about building a tank out of canvas or out of like a flexible vinyl, canvas material?" And when he said that, that was it for me. We became good friends. We became partners. And for a couple of years, we developed the tank that we took to Kickstarter, but we wanted to make floating practical for anyone because, right up until we came along, the cheapest you could float was maybe $10,000 plus a freight bill of a couple $1,000 plus good luck getting something like a giant float tank in your house. Since then, options have come down where you can break float tanks down and then rebuild them into a room. But we just wanted to make the tank that was practical, that anyone could have anywhere in the world for a couple $1,000. So it seems like a scary idea at first to build a canvas flexible tank, but it works perfectly. And we water test every tank that goes out, and the tanks are welded. There's no stitching or anything. It's a total
That's awesome.
Welded waterproof tank. It's crazy what it's made floating so accessible to everyone around the world.
Awesome. So you guys raised 300 grand on Kickstarter for this thing.
It blew our minds. We didn't know if we were going to raise 10,000 or 100,000, and it turns out we raised 300,000.
What was the goal?
The goal was 100.
Amazing.
I remember sitting in the meeting before, like the three of us, my brother's the other partner, Sean, and me, Sean, and William were sitting there and we're like, we don't know if we're going to do seriously 10,000 or maybe 100,000, but let's just do it anyway. Let's just try. And we did. And they were ready.
Amazing. And so what did people pay for each of these? You said a couple grand. More specifically, what does this thing cost?
Yeah. So during the Kickstarter, we had them staggered because we wanted to get it rolling right out of the gate. But I think we sold them for $1,200, $1,400, $1,600. And all said and done, they were about $1,500 on Kickstarter. We've made a lot of improvements. Now they're $1,850.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize is, so 800 pounds of salt is not cheap. You're going to pay about $500 to get that much salt. So that's another added.
Right. And God forbid you have to move apartments. I imagine you got to dump all that salt down the drain. Hey.
Whoa. Yeah. You know, it's so valuable where I would consider like putting it in drums and moving it over.
Yeah. Fair point. Wow. $500. I should just go down to the Dead Sea and take buckets and get it for free.
That's an option. One quick thing I got to throw in is that people don't realize salt lasts for over a year. So if you maintain it, you're not changing out water, you're just maintaining your water. And salt's really sterile. So I've maintained a hot tub and I've maintained a float tank, and float tanks are easy compared to like a hot tub. So
oh, that's interesting. So every year you got about a $500 expense to replace the salt.
Yeah.
Cool. And then minor electricity charges, I guess.
Yeah, mine's coming in at $25, $30. We've had some people around the world, they're paying more, some pay less, but that's about the price.
That is pretty cool. And I guess you need a lot of space to have this thing nonetheless. So is it basically an empty bedroom commitment?
Yeah. So it's the tank, the footprint is 8 foot by 4 foot. It's about 5 foot tall. So people are tucking them in. We've had a ton of people in apartments who are putting them next to their bed. But yeah, ideally you'd like to have a room set up for it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. So how often do you actually float today with the two businesses you're running?
Yeah, I float weekly. I mean, I really used to beat myself up about it because at one time I floated daily, but now I'm like, no, I'm a weekly floater and that's fine. Because like, part of you feels like, oh, you know, I'm selling tanks, I'm writing books on floating, but it's a good rhythm for me. So I float weekly. A lot of people float a couple times a week. The people who float for pain, which is one of the biggest new sections, they float daily because it's like medication for them.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, we have one lady named Lynn Taylor. She was on medication for about 10 years, all sorts of different pain medications. I mean, she was one of the early adopters of our float tank on Kickstarter. And within 2 months of having the tank, she got off all of her medications.
So it was back pain kind of thing?
Yeah. Fibromyalgia is like a pain disorder where it's full body pain.
Ooh.
But she floats daily and she's pain-free, medication-free. I mean, when I say pain-free, light pain, but it's totally changed her life. So now we're diving into like, well, are there more Lynn Taylors out there? Because we got to get the tank in those people's hands, help them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Let me ask you this, Shane. I mean, you're obviously a very health conscious guy. What are some of your other health habits or routines?
So I do the gym a couple times a week. That always helps my brain. I go to the gym for my brain, not even my body.
Agreed.
I've got a very average body, but when I'm in the gym, my brain fires better and I have bigger, better ideas and I'm happier. And you probably know how that feels.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. That's one of the things we teach in our super learning courses. You got to eat well, you got to sleep well, and you got to move.
You do. Totally.
Without a doubt, you have to move.
One of the other things I do is I try and just eat generally healthy, but I'm not a health nut. I'll pack in a good hamburger fast food meal once or twice a week, but overall I try and eat healthy. And this is recent for me, but I quit drinking diet sodas. That was my thing. I was like, oh, it's diet. I can drink all I want. It's good and it won't affect me. I quit drinking it for a few weeks. And then when I went back to it, every time I drink it, I'd get a headache. And then the next day I'd wake up kind of irritable and pissed off. And so now I'm realizing that something in diet soda messes with me. So that's one of my things I've kicked recently is I don't know what it is. And I love Diet Coke, but I'm going to not drink it that much anymore.
It's probably a very wise idea.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a book. I think you've written one book or you've written more than one book.
I've just finished one book. I'm writing another one right now, but just finished the one.
Congratulations, as am I, actually. Writing
awesome.
I have a couple books in the fire, as they say. A couple pots in the fire.
After going through it, it's like the best feeling. It's almost like an elaborate journal.
Yeah.
I feel like if I wouldn't have pulled it out, it might have got lost in time.
Exactly. So one of the things I really like, I don't know where I picked it up, but essentially the idea is you write a book when the knowledge is building up in you and you have to get it out. You have to get it on paper. Otherwise, it's going to burst and then you're going to lose it.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And I think about that. So I recently started drafting a book on travel and essentially the habits and hacks that I have for travel, that how can I survive 34 hours of flying around the world? Well, I have techniques and I have habits. And I'm like, this knowledge has to make it into something. It's too much for a blog post. So I started writing a book. I think I might continue through with it. I started jotting down some ideas and I think I'm going to go through with it just as a fun side project, completely unrelated to anything kind of superhuman.
It kind of reminds me of Tim Ferriss's stuff, how he's always like hacking the travel and the living abroad.
It's a bit of Tim Ferriss. It's a bit of Jason Bourne.
Cool.
So tell me about your book. What is it all about?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily want to be an author. What was interesting is every time someone would ask me about floating, especially with the new company, I'd be like, oh, go to YouTube and what are you dealing with in your life? And they'd be like, oh, stress or this or sleep or depression or anxiety. And then I'd refer them in a different way. And it got to the point to me where I was like, why hasn't someone written a book that goes over all of the major benefits and just compile it in a quick read where someone who wants to get familiar with floating could access it? And that's when the idea for the float tank cure, that's the name of the book, came out. So right now there's some great books that exist that's the spiritual realm of floating, or kind of more heavy science, but less covering all the different aspects. So I just wrote the most approachable, mainstream, here's the benefits, here's the stories, here's the science book. And I think you can read it in a few hours. It's 140 something pages, but I wrote the book because it needed to be written.
Oh yeah.
I started in January and just now I got 700 books delivered on Friday, and I've been writing Post-its to go in all the books because we're giving them away free at the Float Conference this year. Mm-hmm. It's in Portland, and I think it's in 14th of this month. But anyway, I just put Post-its in all the book, and I'm like, if you love this book and want to help this spread, just leave an Amazon review of the book, because that's the only way I can think of to help floating spread is to make it pop up on Amazon more. So I just been writing Post-its all weekend.
Awesome. I love it. That's really, really smart. I should do that.
I had some serious hand cramping, and every Post-it took just 45 seconds, and I'm finished with 500. So I don't know.
I'm surprised you're actually shipping the books yourself, though.
Yeah.
You're not going the Create Space ship to fulfill route?
I am. So we're doing that on Amazon. So this was like a separate deal with the Float Conference. Ashcon and Graham, who run the conference, I just asked them, do you guys think I could get these in everyone's hands at the conference this year? I'll do them free. And they're like, yeah, send them over. So I just printed one print, and I'm sending those out. But yeah, it'll be on Create Space on Amazon.
Cool. How many people attend this conference every year?
This year, 500. Last year, it was like 3 something. The year before, like 2. It is really growing.
500 Post-it notes, though.
Dude, I'll send you a picture. I'm going to do a blog post on it, because if it works, then it's a great story. And if it doesn't work, then I just damaged my hand for a whole week. Carpal tunnel for nothing. Yeah.
That's very, very cool. So the book goes into the practicum, the science, why it works, how it works. All that
Some
kind of
great
stuff.
stories. Yeah. And it's got my story woven through it with anxiety and depression. And so it's cool.
I love it. Now, the anxiety and depression thing, would you say that that's been a permanent cure for you? Or is it something where if you miss a couple weeks of floating, that creeps back?
It creeps back. I used to think I could beat anxiety and depression, but it's very much a maintenance. It's like trying to beat fatness or something. It's like you got to just maintain it for the rest of ever. But it's weird because we have a newborn son, me and my wife. He's 2 weeks old today.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you, man. He's the love of our life. And we're so happy. But we also have not been sleeping much. But with the lack of sleep and the 500 Post-its, I am like feeling those old feelings again of anxiety and depression. And I know that I have to get to the gym, get in the float tank, eat right, sleep right when I can, and maintain it. So it's a cure in the sense of I know what to do when I need it.
That's super interesting. Let me ask you something that just popped into my head, because I'm realizing Epsom salts are packed with magnesium, yeah?
Yeah.
These ones that you're using, which is very interesting because magnesium is probably the most important mineral. I don't know if it's a mineral or a metal. I think it's a mineral. Most important mineral in the body. It's used in over 400 chemical processes or something like that in the body. And most people, 60 to 70% of people, it's estimated, are magnesium deficient in Western societies. So I'm wondering if that also, beyond the meditative and the restorative, I mean, magnesium is really, really well absorbed through the skin, and just realizing that's probably a big aspect of this.
Wow. Well, there was a guy who's last year's flow conference, and he was all about the, transdermal absorption of the magnesium and how beneficial it is. But I really want to learn more about that. I've got to. It's totally relevant. And it makes me wonder, like, what if that's part of the reason it works so well?
Right. I know Tim Ferriss is so serious about this that he actually had like a Japanese Epsom salt bath installed in the middle of his house, and will sit there in a hot pool of Epsom salt every night before bed.
Get out. Dude, I know it makes you sleepy.
It does. It certainly does. Magnesium is really important for sleep as well. I take it every night before bed, actually.
Do you just take like a regular magnesium supplement?
I take about 300 milligrams. I have all different kinds of bottles that I've picked up. I've forgotten it when I travel, so I have like 6 bottles going right now. So it depends.
Is that the stuff that's called Calm?
No, I looked at Calm and I looked at the ingredients and I looked at the price and I was like, I can build this stack for a third of the price. So I didn't end up buying it. I have one that's a magnesium, like a CalMag Zinc, which is nice. And then I have one that's just plain old magnesium.
Dude, I've got to experiment with that.
It's really worthwhile because not only are we not eating enough cruciferous vegetables to really get the magnesium, but also the ones that we are eating are the products of mass agriculture, and all they're putting in is NPK. So our food, at least I believe, my opinion, our food is not as nutrient rich as it would be in the wild.
Oh, I believe it.
Fertilized with decaying corpses. So yeah, I supplement. Magnesium is actually one of the only things I supplement in terms of nutrition. I mean, I take the beta alanine and the creatine and the stuff that's not naturally occurring in the diet. But in terms of things, you could argue creatine is, but in terms of things that are supposed to be covered by eating your veggies, magnesium is the only one I take.
Wow. I'm going to totally get onto that. Especially, I want to do the biohacking focus on floating. So that's perfect. Brainwaves, salt.
But get blood
magnesium.
tests first, right? Because if you're sitting a couple hours in a tank once a week, you're probably getting a good amount of magnesium. It would be interesting to find out. It'd also be interesting to know if the absorption through the body is part of the reason why you have to change the salt every year. Just kind of thinking out loud. I mean, it's probably that. It's probably you're introducing contaminants.
Yeah, definitely a contaminant issue. Interesting, though. I'm totally going to look into that.
Yeah, I'm all about the magnesium. I had a 2-time world champion kickboxer named Adi Rotem on the show, and I asked her, what supplements are you taking? What are you allowed to take when you're competing at the world championship levels? She's like, magnesium. My last fight, I was dancing around the ring with my hand up in the air yelling magnesium.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's like a super supplement, and it's so important for so many different processes in the body.
Oh my God, dude, I have got to dive into this deeply.
It's pretty interesting stuff.
I will.
So Shane, let me ask you this, as before we wrap up too quickly, what is one thing that you believe that most people think is crazy?
Yeah, so if I had to bet right now that ancient aliens have visited Earth, I would probably bet they have.
Yeah?
Is that certified crazy?
That's pretty crazy, although I just finished reading all 5 books of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
I have to admit, it really got me thinking.
Can I explain it in a way that makes it seem more normal?
Yeah, please do.
Have you seen The Cosmos with Neil Tyson deGrasse?
I haven't. I started watching it and then I got distracted.
Okay, so he does this whole thing where he lays out the universe in a calendar year. And he says, this is, the beginning of the universe. This is where we are now. And he's like, humans exist in the last, 2 minutes of this calendar year. This is how long it is. And he's like, written word has been in the last 2 seconds. And he's like, transportation is in the last whatever millisecond. It's like crazy. This little teeny tiny shred on December 31st in the history of the universe.
Yep.
So my thing is, if we're having these leaps and bounds in technology in shreds of seconds in this universal calendar, then surely somewhere else the seed of life was planted, maybe even a month ago, which would be like 1 billion years ago. If this seed existed anywhere else in the infinite universe, then they surely could have gone through a technological growth and been able to travel. And so I approach it like a business decision. I'm like, well, the numbers, infinite worlds,
Right.
The time we're creating technology, slivers of microseconds in relative
Totally true.
term. So that's my thing. I'm like, it's possible. I sound totally crazy.
So not at all, actually, because Stephen Hawking just announced, I forget with whom else, but they just announced a $100 million fund to help find life on another planet. And Stephen Hawking believes exactly what you said. In an infinite universe with an infinite number of worlds, it's almost infinitely impossible that nowhere else has life been established.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like a no-brainer to me when I think about the numbers, because we're just one of a billion stars in this galaxy, and this is one of a billion galaxies, and there's infinite galaxies. We only know what time, like the light traveling for billions of years, that's all we know, is because that's all we can see. But it's bigger than what we can even see out of billions of light years.
Yeah, exactly.
The odds are just too great.
So that's pretty interesting. All right. I did not expect that one, but yeah. And I just Googled it. It's Yuri Milner, the Russian billionaire. He and Stephen Hawking are basically putting up $100 million to search for alien life.
Wow.
Which is, I think you're in pretty good company, honestly.
I feel ridiculous, but...
So, all right, let me hit you with the lightning round. Just two really, really quick questions. What is the most impactful $100 you've ever spent?
I'm going to say easy, a couple books. One book I read 10 years ago, The Science of Getting Rich. Kind of a cheesy title. Mm-hmm. This book I obsessed about, and it taught me that all I had to do was believe it and envision it and then go do the work to get it, but act as if it was already there. That book I just got obsessive about. And that was, you know how books happen at stages in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that was the one I needed to get moving. And then the next book was, for me, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, Deepak. And then there's another $30 in the book. The most recent one that I've gotten obsessed about was The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, where I realized that I could absolutely take on anything that exists in the world if I do a piece a day.
Yeah.
So now we're at 30, 60, 90. Let's say that my last book, I'm studying this book called Essentialism. Mm-hmm. But if $100, that's the most radical way you could rock your life, is find those books for you. Because, man, 4 books changed everything about my life.
I love it. My next question was going to be, what have been the most impactful books in your life? But you nailed it.
Yeah. What are your books?
So Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yeah.
Changed my life pretty dramatically from an early age.
I would throw that in mine too. And I haven't studied it like I should, but man, it's solid.
It is really solid. That's one. Another one is A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, yeah. Dude, when I was going through anxiety and panic, that book really spoke to me. I haven't been back to it since, which is weird.
I love it. It completely reorganized my priorities in life. Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek and 4-Hour Body. I think both shifted how I look at work and how I look at fitness and brought me to where I am now.
Oh, dude, the 4-Hour Workweek had a big impact on me. I had met my wife and she had a job in Australia. Mm-hmm. And I had just stumbled upon that book at the same time. And I went out there for a couple months. It prepped me to realize that I could just do what I was doing from anywhere.
Right.
But it's weird how books land at the times you need them.
Right. Exactly. I am a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in the law of attraction, that when you need a lesson most is when it's going to be delivered to you.
Totally.
So let me ask you this, Shane. I know we've pretty much used up our time and I really do appreciate it. Where should we send people who are interested, want to learn more about your book and this amazing at-home float tank and what you do? And I know you do coaching. There's a lot going on here. So where do we send people?
Yeah. So if they are interested in floating, I would point them in the direction of the book. And the book is The Float Tank Cure. So you could go to thefloattankcure.com. I'm giving away a free chapter and it will have some of the great articles we pulled out of that and some of the great stories. So The Float Tank Cure is the place I would go if you're interested in floating. And if you're beyond interested in floating and you're thinking about a tank at your home, the startup company we have is Zen Float Company. So it's zenfloatco.com. That's where you'll see our Kickstarter product and all the success and stories we've had with that. And that product's really changing people's lives. And then me, I'm doing just like a personal branding site, because I do the family business, I do the float, I do the book. And so my site is shanestott.com, and I write about what I want to write about on there. It's a lot of like weird philosophy
stuff about aliens and
yeah, like aliens. And no, but it's funny because I started this personal brand site. I write about what I want to write about, and I don't think anyone really cares. So I wonder if any of your listeners care.
That's awesome. It's actually funny you say about personal branding, because probably by the time this episode comes out, I will have released a course that I've been working on with Dr. Anthony Metivier, which basically Our target audience, honestly, is guys like you, maybe without the actual business selling products, but guys who've written a book or have a podcast, and gals, by the way, have a podcast, have an online course, but don't have the whole ecosystem, or maybe have an idea for a book, but are afraid of becoming a brand, or afraid of establishing authority and declaring themselves as an authority in something. So it goes all the way from, what is your story? You've told us a very nice story, which, by the way, perfectly fits the formula we recommend to our students. You have to have conflict. You have to have overcome challenges. How did you address those challenges? I mean, I don't know if you've been coached on that story, but it's obviously, a very compelling one and very strong and speaks to your business and shows how much you believe in what you do. And then takes you all the way through, how do you write a book? How do you make that book into an online course? How do you make that online course into a podcast? How do you set up your mailing list? Like all this good stuff. So I want to send it to you when it goes live and get your feedback on it.
I would love to see that. And I could definitely use some help. Right now, I feel like I put myself out there and I put what I care about, but I'm waiting for feedback to know where to go.
That's brilliant, though. That's also a big part of the strategy.
Okay, cool. Because I want people to be like, oh, we like this. And then I'll give them more of that.
Exactly. Do you hear that, guys? Do you hear that, superhumans? Give feedback. Give feedback to Shane. Give feedback to me, because that's what every entrepreneur thrives on and learns on. Awesome. Mr. Shane Stott, it has been a pleasure. We will link up everyone to all the resources we've talked about in the show notes, from your website to your book to float tanks and aliens. Did I miss anything?
No, you got it all. But thank you so much for having me. Seriously, it's just been awesome chatting with you.
It is my pleasure. Let's be in touch about Dr. Andrew Hill measuring your brain, and we'll be in touch about a float tank, maybe, if I move to a bigger apartment.
Oh, for sure.
And then we'll chat about the branding you thing.
For sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Take care.
Adios.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.